housemoney.media.
Welcome to episode 74 of the Real Estate Maximalist podcast. Today we talk with Mary Nickless. Where did the idea of buying your first rental property, what sprouted that idea?
It came from two teachers' salaries is not going to get you that far. I had my first child at 34, and suddenly I was like, oh my gosh, I have to have retirement money. I have to pay for her college. What am I doing?
So stay tuned to learn how Mary talked her uninterested spouse into real estate investing, how she used her home equity to buy more properties, and how she's using real estate for lifestyle design. But first, a word from our sponsors.
I'm Jasmine from Jasmine Mortgage Team, and we love working with first-time home buyers and new investors. Really, anyone looking to change their life through real estate. I love helping people make really smart financial decisions. I have worked with Alan and his personal clients for many years on many deals, and I would love to spend some time learning about your journey and helping you achieve your goals. You can book a free consultation with us by calling or texting 404-600-1500. Follow us on Instagram at Jasmine Mortgage Team, or our website is jasminemortgageteam.com.
Hey, this is James and Emily.
And you've heard us on episode 72 of the Real Estate Maximalist podcast.
And we've just launched a course on teaching you how to manage your Airbnbs. It is a video course. There's videos and then there are lessons that go along with that so you can read along. We have 10 different templates, a furnishing checklist, a cleaning checklist, a quarterly cleaning checklist, a quarterly maintenance checklist. We have all the tracking for spreadsheets. We've got some templates for guest messaging. And then we actually go through and show you like, okay, this is what you should be doing. This is how we find cleaners. This is how we find local handymen. This is how we schedule those people. We go through all of that process. Everything that we do, we have on there. We've covered all our bases and teach you how to do everything remotely as well. And for the listeners of this, you can go to rethinktherightrace.com/maxi to find our course for $399. And you're also going to get some bonus content there as well.
You can find that at rethinktherightrace.com/maxi, MAXI.
Welcome to the Real Estate Maximalist podcast. I'm your host, Alan Corey. I'm the author of Housefire, Financial Independence and Retire Early, as well as $1 Million by 30. I've retired twice through real estate. And in my retirement, I've done nothing but more real estate. I've been investing for 22 years and run the Alan Corey team of real estate agents in Atlanta. I've done everything from short-term rentals, long-term rentals, flips, new construction, small multifamily, large apartment buildings, you name it, I've done it. But I find it's just easiest to say, I am a real estate maximalist. It's an exciting episode today. I want to share, I've just launched my coaching program. I can get you up and running as a real estate investor in just 9 weeks. Go to realestatemaxi.com. I'm creating a small class of just 12 students where I'm going to give you one-on-one coaching and mentorship over a 6-month period. Check it out. It's a limited time frame, limited price, just for 12 students. So go to realestatemaxi.com. Now, let's hear from Mary Nickless. She's known on Twitter and social media as Get Money Smarter. I've been following her path to financial freedom. Her and her husband, as you heard in the intro, both teachers, don't have a major salary, of course. We know teachers are underpaid. Her first investment, age of 34, and it was after the birth of her daughter and during coronavirus, okay? So whatever excuse you have in your head to not getting started, well, those thoughts didn't cross Mary's mind, but I had to ask her, how did you grow a portfolio of 8 homes in under 2.5 years? What was the catalyst to get her going?
There's a ceiling when you're a teacher to how much you can earn. And I've started looking into investing, making more money. And I came across Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it was the biggest light bulb aha moment. And I remember finishing it and coming home. And I said to my husband, I'm like, okay, we have to buy real estate. And he's just like, what are you talking about? And while Rich Dad Poor Dad's not a how to buy real estate book, it's the mindset. It's understanding that coming from a lower middle class family, the way we view money is kind of the wrong way to look at it, right? It's not working to cover your bills and then whatever's left over is your savings and then that's life, right? It is taking that money in between your income and your expenses and investing it as passively as possible, investing it to grow it. And it's understanding that kind of mentality of how to invest your money wisely and kind of make more money from that.
Mary's right here. If you're not familiar with the book by Richard Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it's not a real estate book, but it's the #1 book that most investors say got them into real estate. I would say it was definitely influential in my career. When I first learned about it, I read it before I had even bought a property. And if you're unfamiliar with it, the idea is this. Richard's Poor Dad works, gets taxed, roughly 50% of his take-home pay disappears. Whatever's left over after living expenses, his Poor Dad invests. And as you know, there's usually not a lot left over in this scenario. His Rich Dad does the opposite, starts businesses, invests in income streams, and then all the expenses that are associated with that come out before his Rich Dad is taxed. So he's bringing more home in his paycheck because he's taxed at a lower amount. And then whatever's left over, he lives off on, and then he invests some more. And doing this strategy, he has more money to live off on, and he has more money to invest. And the way it's presented in the book, it just drives home the point. You need assets to be rich, and real estate is a very achievable asset for most people.
Oh, assets. Coming from my background or my husband's, it was never the way people talked about money. It was never a thing we talked about. And it was such a light bulb.
Both my parents are teachers, and I don't think we had one money conversation except how can we get this cheaper?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, investments and cash flow and assets. I mean, those were not words we used,
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I think it's a reminder to everyone that having these conversations, especially with your kids or as a family publicly, I think is good. Have it front of mind and not be a surprise and hearing it for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe, I was like, oh my gosh. It's like, it really is, it seems so simple too, like now looking at it, but if you never looked at it in that way, it doesn't make sense until it's like, I need money coming in. I need people paying me, and this equity we're sitting on our house does nothing for us, but I could take it, I could put it into something else and have people pay me every month. I mean, the thought of it was like, oh, okay, let's do that.
That's awesome.
That was it.
So you dug down deep on your first purchase, it sounds like, because you weren't in the savings mentality and didn't have a bunch of cash in hand. So how did you go about buying your first property, financing it, finding it?
As I'm learning about real estate and understanding how it works, I was looking around like, okay, where are we going to get the money from? We had like maybe 12,000 in savings. We weren't bad, but it wasn't, I didn't feel like it was anything we could do much with. And so as I'm trying to figure out where to get the money and what I should do, through my research, it's like, oh, a HELOC, I could get a HELOC on the house. So I called around to a bunch of banks, and I mean, our house had appreciated so much and we had, paid down the mortgage extra and things.
Now I want to jump in and explain a HELOC, which is a home equity line of credit. So when you have a house, you owe a mortgage on it, and then you have what it's worth. That delta, that difference is your home equity. And there's banks that will lend on it. And you're basically getting a credit line on that home equity that's similar to like a credit card. You may have a credit card with a $10,000 spending limit. If you spend nothing, it doesn't charge you anything. If you spend $2,000 on your credit card, you'll pay interest on that $2,000. You can also max it out $10,000 and you'll be charged that full amount. That's exactly what a home equity works. So in Mary's situation, where she didn't have a ton of savings, but she was house rich, she tapped into that equity using a home equity line of credit or a HELOC to fund her first real estate investment. And Mary told me she was looking for the 1% rule in her area near Tampa, Florida. The 1% rule is basically a rule of thumb that says you take the rental amount and you take the purchase price. And if the rental amount is at least 1% of the purchase price, you're probably going to make money no matter what. So if you're looking at $150,000 homes, if it can rent for $1,500, pretty much however the numbers shake out, that's going to be profitable. Now, that's not a rule to live and die by. It may not exist in your area, but if you are in a lower price area where rents are really high and housing price is really cheap, that's a metric that you can use and one that Mary leaned into.
We got it was a crazy HELOC. It was like 200,000 credit limit on the house. And that was it. So we're like, okay, we'll use this. We'll buy our first property. And at the same time, I was trying to figure out where should I buy. The kind of the area I lived in was kind of pricey. So I started just going to like open houses because I didn't know what else to do and talking to realtors. And a couple of realtors who were investors were like, oh, you should look in this area it's just north of Pinellas County. And I grew up in this area and I had literally, I think, never even been to that part. And it was about an hour away. So my husband and I drove up there, and literally as you cross the border from one county to the next county, home prices drop like 100,000 and property prices drop. And what the realtor explained to me was people in the north part of the county where rents were a lot higher were driving the 20 minutes into the cheaper county and paying rents up there. Wow. And we're like, oh, okay, this could be like the perfect area to buy a rental. And so the first house we purchased was 128,000. And the tenants, there were already tenants in there and they were paying $1,200 a month. And I mean, we were looking at property here that were like 350,000 and the rent was like 1,700, and so you're nowhere near the 1% rule. And also like all our money would be gone on just the first property. So this area had a lot of interest. A lot of renters were going there who worked in our county, and the prices were cheap. So that was our first property. It was like base hit, simple. They had already renovated the house. There were tenants already. So we just bought it and we're like, I guess we own a house now.
That was single family?
It was a single family home, like 1,200 square feet. It's a 2-2 with a bonus room, which is common in that area. And that was it. We still have the same tenants in there as well.
And you bought that in all cash, but really it was your entire HELOC?
So we actually even got financing. So we used the HELOC just as the down payment because I was like, even though I had this big HELOC, I was kind of scared, right? It's my first property. I was like, I don't want to use all of it, right? And what's the payment like? And now I wouldn't feel that way. But, and at the time, people didn't know about the area. I mean, this is literally 2020, the beginning of 2020, but people didn't really know about the area and investors didn't know. So there wasn't really any competition. I think that she maybe had 2 offers. And so ours was just 20% down financing on a house that had just been remodeled with tenants. And she actually was asking 135 and we talked her down to 128. She needed to get out. She had like a change of circumstance for her. And she was just like, okay, I'll sell at that price. That's fine. And then literally, just to, of course, you can kind of tell by the early 2020 what's about to happen. Our closing date was like the weekend Florida closed with coronavirus, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And thank goodness title companies were essential, so they stayed open. But it was like, I remember our closing, it was the first time I ever wore a mask because it was like so new for Florida. And we go in and it's like the bank is, it almost didn't happen. The bank was freaking out. They're like, they called the day of the closing. They called my work to make sure I still had a job, which is unusual. And we as well, we're kind of like, what's happening? Like, should we still buy this house? But we knew it was a good deal. So we're like, we're going through with it if everyone else is, and then when coronavirus hit, we thought, oh, great. It's going to crash. We'll get 10 more houses like this. We'll be done. This is great. And then of course, like literally the opposite thing happened and prices shot up.
Usually every couple, there's one person who's really kind of excited about Rich Dad, Poor Dad and investing. And then you have a spouse who's maybe more conservative, tighter with money, I should say, or risk adverse. As a realtor, I help a lot of couples and there's usually, it's a balance. And my wife is the same way. I'm all in and my wife wants to take things slow.
Yeah.
Or you and your husband, were you guys just immediately attracted to real estate, or did you have to win him over?
Oh, I had to win him over. Yeah, for sure. I'm a little bit more of the ideas person in the relationship, and he's like the reality check. So it was tough at first. He was like, what are you talking about? It was like a closed wall of I don't know what you mean, we need to do real estate. And of course he hadn't read the book, and it's very hard to explain someone, when you're so excited about what you've just kind of discovered. It's hard to come off like you're thinking level headed.
Right.
So what I think won him over was two main things. And one was when I talked about it with him, at first he's just like, oh, okay, it's another one of your ideas, right? And then he saw, like, every weekend I went to open houses. I kept looking at houses, and he'd go like, so how'd it go today? And I was like, oh yeah, I saw some interesting things. And he's like, oh, okay. And then next time he was like, well, what are we talking? What are the prices? As he saw, like, it was literally a month or 2 months of, I was like reading real estate books, I'm listening to stuff on real estate, and I'm going to open houses, I'm talking with people. But for like 2 straight months, I'm the only one doing any of this. And he's just like ignoring me completely. He finally was like, okay, why is this a good thing? Can you explain it? And then just like showing the numbers, he was kind of like, okay, I think I'm starting to get it. So it took a good like 4 to 5 months, and then he was on board.
So it sounds like your husband was basically watching you follow through with your ideas,
Yes.
learn more, research it. It wasn't just an idea and you never talked about it again. You basically won him over through your actions. And did he eventually read the book?
No, he was just like, okay, give me like the cliff notes.
Okay.
So I picked out a few properties, and then I ran the numbers so that he could see, like, here's how you run through the numbers of a deal. This is what our expenses would be. This is the mortgage. This is how we're going to pay it. And once I kind of showed him that, he was on board.
Now you might be asking, what are those numbers that Mary's talking about? Or any real estate investor when they say, just run the numbers. Honestly, it's mostly just addition and subtraction. But I do have a real estate property analysis calculator at realestatemaxi.com. If you want to use mine, you can easily create your own. You put in 2 columns, income and expenses. Income, you just put the rent amount that property will generate. You can figure out the rental amount by just looking at similar properties and what they're renting for and get an idea of what your property could rent for. And then you create a column under expenses that includes PITI, which is PITI, which stands for principal, interest, taxes, and an insurance. That's typically your mortgage payment. If you escrow your insurance and your property taxes, that's your big lump sum of your mortgage payment is going to include those 4 things. Then you create arbitrary expenses for the rest. So I'll use 5% for vacancy. So I'll take 5% of the rental income and just earmark it for vacancies. I'm sure I'm going to have tenant turnover. When someone moves out, it takes me a week or 2 to repaint it, put on new locks, and put it back up on the market. And typically the next person is going to move in on the 1st. I'm just budgeting now for those days to happen. Secondly, I put 10% for repairs and maintenance. Hey, it's a people business. Things are going to break. Toilets are going to need to be fixed. I just want to budget for it right now for that rainy day in the future. Rarely do I ever spend 10% of every single rental check on a repair, but I may have a $500, $600 repair every 9 months or so. So at least I budgeted for that from the beginning. And then I do another 10% for CapEx. This is capital expenditures, big ticket items, things that the tenant's not going to break, but just wear out over time in a house. I'm talking the siding, the roof, HVACs, things like that are 10-year, 15-year lifespans, and you might as well budget for it from the beginning. That is the bulk of my expenses there. And depending on the property, I might put snow removal if it's in a winter heavy place. I may add sewer and water if I'm the landlord providing those utilities. Typically, I like to buy properties where the tenant is going to be paying those costs, but you got to look into those extra things to say who's going to pay for this, the landlord or not. And that's it. You take the income, you minus all the expenses. That's running the numbers. And whatever's left over is your cash flow. If it's positive, I usually pull the trigger. I'm looking at least $150 minimum cash flow on a property. And higher the price point, the more cash flow I would want, just because I'm putting more money into the deal. but that's me. You can run your own numbers and create your own arbitrary expenses and your own benchmarks on what makes a good return for you. But if you do that the same way for property after property after property, and you've looked at 5, 10, 15 properties, you've run the numbers equally across them all, one property is obviously going to stand out with the most amount of cash flow, and it's quite easy to pull the trigger at that point. So obviously the first one went well during coronavirus. This led to a bigger portfolio now. Was your husband immediately excited and say, let's do another one? Or did you sort of have to do another exercise to win him over on 2, 3, and 4?
Oh yeah. It was like, it took a few before it took a year. Yeah. So we got another one in a similar neighborhood, like literally the next neighborhood over. But then at that point, the prices were like shooting up, mid 2020. And this area, suddenly everyone discovered it. I don't know what happened. Like we were getting outbidded. The prices shot up 50, 60,000 from what we were looking at literally in March. So I was like, okay, maybe we need to pivot. And I think the pivot, because it was so early or new for him, he was uncomfortable with that. So I had to kind of, again, reacclimate him into, like, here's what we need to do. And so I just started calling around different realtors, listing agents, trying to figure out like, okay, well, where are the numbers going to work again? Because suddenly this area, the rents hadn't gone up yet, but the prices shot up, and now the numbers weren't working anymore. So I was looking at multifamily, both thinking about duplex, quadplex, and then our duplex area is actually in this county. I was doing like driving for dollars. I was driving around trying to figure out where are the multifamily, because I'm from this area, but there's like all these neighborhoods I'd never even driven in. And they just are like kind of working class. And it's also up and coming because there's a lot of workers coming to this area. They're putting in this highway to St. Pete, if anyone's familiar with St. Petersburg, which is getting so expensive. And so workers are working in St. Pete and then using this new highway to drive north about 15 minutes and now renting from the area we bought in. So I kind of found that and was like, oh, okay, this is going to be a good area to buy in. And that's where we pivoted into. But it took like 7 to 8 months. So for anyone who are like, I only have 1 or 2 properties and I can't figure out where to buy next, it's tough in the moment, but you just keep going because it took about 7 to 8 months. And then I found this area and I found property in it, and it's worked out really well.
And so like through driving through dollars, it's just basically you're checking out new neighborhoods, talking to people and
Yep.
what tenants and real estate agents, and just trying to.
Yeah, I did. Like the 2 biggest things was I noticed there was a lot of flipping going on in that neighborhood. And I was paying attention to like what the purchase price was, what the, ARV was after they flipped it. And then the other thing is and it's literally like 8 streets. It's like just this one like area, right? So I kind of honed in on this area, and I called every listing agent who had recently sold in there and was just like, what are you seeing going on in this neighborhood? What's happening? Do you have anything coming up? Do you have anything else you've sold? Because you'll notice like a lot of listing agents might have sold 3 or 4 properties in a certain area. And a lot of times they were, portfolio owners, and so that's what I did. And I came across one who had like literally that day had put a duplex back on the market, and she liked me. And I was the first person who called her that day. And then she said her phone was ringing off the hook. I called her back in like 2 hours, and she's like, I really like you. I've gotten all these offers, but yours is coming in very competitive. The person's picking yours.
Nice.
So first duplex I bought, I actually hadn't seen it in person until after the offer was accepted. And then we went to see it the next day.
Here's a move real estate investors need to learn quickly. You can run numbers to the best of your ability. Sure, you're guessing what the rental income is going to be. You're guessing on some arbitrary expenses. But once the numbers look like they make sense, go ahead and make offers. Don't waste your time going to go looking at the property. You go make offers, and then once it gets accepted and you're under contract, then you can kind of do the real due diligence, really check out the condition of the property, the rental income that it can bring in, what the expenses are going to be. Otherwise, you're spending all your time looking at homes and you're not going to progress very far. You want to be offer ready and have trust in your calculator and how you run the numbers. And then you can just make offers all day. And then if something sticks, then you do what Mary does. Go look at the property after it's under contract. Wow, that's great. What's your portfolio today?
So it's 8 properties, although we are selling one. So really, I guess 7 properties, 3 duplexes, 3 houses here in Florida. And then I just this year bought a house in Toledo, Ohio. So we have a house up there and we're looking to buy 2 more.
Why are you selling the one that you're selling?
It is the bane of my existence. And we've appreciated enough on it that I'd rather take the money that's in the deal and buy more property in Toledo right now. And I'm okay letting that one go. I know at first it's like you hate to let any property go because you're like, let it appreciate for 30 years,
I do the same thing. With my portfolio, I usually say, which one do I like the least? Let me sell that. Like it could be, I just don't like the location, or
Yeah.
it's a maintenance nightmare, or hey, I found something
It's
better I would like to replace it with.
Yeah. It's takes up most of my time and is literally probably the least profitable.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and it's the smallest duplex that we own and the slowest to rent it out. And so again, what I can sell it and then take that and buy more property now in this other market and get better cash flow on it. So
What's your time commitment to manage your portfolio?
we're going to try to manage our Florida properties ourselves and see what that's like doing long distance management. We have our systems in place and we have a person who's going to just help us when there's turnover. I have a property management company in Toledo, and it's nice. Once you find the right management company, which is hard, but once you do that, it's nice to kind of relinquish that control to somebody. So I will be ready to turn them over, but we want to get to a certain number before we are paying 10% a month for for property management.
A certain number in cash flow.
Yeah.
And so you're self-managing your Florida properties right now. And how many hours a week do you put in to self-manage? Because I know you and your husband have full-time jobs.
Yeah. And I run the management side by the week, maybe 5 hours, but the problem is there's periods where you're going to do more work. It's going to be a little more. So it might go up to 10 if there's an issue or repair. It's really not that time consuming, except when there's, so we renovated with turnover this summer. So as I said, we were doing 3 properties at the same time. That was very time consuming. Now that they're renovated and tenants are in, it's like I could go months without needing to do anything except just make sure everyone paid rent.
And these are all long-term rentals?
Yeah.
What brought you to Toledo, Ohio? Do you have a home base there or anything?
No. It was like pivot number 2. So as last year we bought 4 properties in Florida, actually 5. This is a little live and flip that we're doing, but as we did that, prices this past year in 2022 just like shot up as well. And then I couldn't figure out anywhere here that I could kind of find a deal that really worked where the numbers worked. And so I decided to try long distance investing. Why not, right? I understand how to run the numbers, and it's just understanding how to buy out of state. I also wanted to see if I could do it, and it's turned out to be just fine. There's a bit of a learning curve, and it's hard because you have a lot of control when you invest locally, and it's like relinquishing control to and trusting the people that you are kind of listening to who are there. But we decided to go for it. So I did own it without seeing the property. And then I had flown up to Toledo for just a couple days to really get a sense of the neighborhoods.
So can you imagine yourself, I guess 2020, beginning of coronavirus, buying your first property, and 2.5 years later, you're confidently buying properties out of state, sight unseen?
No, it's insane. It's like it's night and day. I remember like New Year's Day, we always go and sit on the beach and talk about our like upcoming year and what our goals are and resolutions, right? And I remember just 2020, of course, no idea coronavirus is going to happen, but also looking ahead and just being like, I just want one rental property. I want it to work out. And it was so scary. And it was just this huge idea that I didn't think was possible. And that's just what happens when you actually like take action and just jump in, right? I told Mark, that's my husband, I was like, by March, I'm buying a property. Like I'm going to do it. And if I don't put a deadline, I'm never going to do it. I'm just going to keep listening to podcasts, right? So I put a deadline. We closed March, it was like March 27th. And then once you get your first property, you firstly see that, okay, this is completely doable. It's not as big of a deal as it feels like. And then all these other possibilities opened up. I mean, I didn't know what a cash out refinance was. I didn't know how to manage tenants. I didn't know how to do a rehab or what the BRRRR strategy was really. But once you have your first property, you can figure all that out. And so the first duplex we bought was basically a BRRRR. And, when you get the first cash out refinance check and you're like, they're just giving me $150,000. This is the most amazing thing ever. When that happens, you become really addicted. And then you just keep going. And every step you realize, okay, I can do this. Okay, now I'm managing tenants. So yeah, I can do that. Okay, I just remodeled this duplex. Okay, I can do that. So it's taking action, and every step you take leads to pushing yourself a little bit further down the line. Our time frame has gone quicker than we expected it to, and that's exciting. But yeah, looking back on that New Year's Day 2020, we've come a lot further than we thought we would be.
Wow. A lot of takeaways here from Mary. First, set yourself a deadline. This is specifically why I named my new course, Launch Your Real Estate Investing Career in Just 9 Weeks. Because if you give yourself a deadline and you hold yourself to it, you're going to follow through. And this is what Mary's saying, take action. And just by taking action, she told herself, I'll figure it out later. Let me just buy a property. I'll figure out how to renovate it. I'll figure out how to manage it. I'll figure out how to be a landlord. And then she does it again and again and again. She just wanted one property. And here we are at the end of 2022, and she has 8 properties. Not only that, she's using real estate to design her life so that she can live her dream of traveling and living in different countries. Who wouldn't want that? And it all started with one rental property. So what is your goal now? It sounds like you want to travel abroad with the whole family.
Yes. As we were buying rentals and kind of saw the opportunity that we were able to have with them, at the same time, my husband was kind of struggling with his job, and we were talking about, we wanted to travel with our kids like we traveled in our 20s and share those kind of experiences with them. As we were running the numbers, we're like, okay, well, our rental income is going to cover most of our expenses now. Maybe we can just do this, And so we sort of wanted to reach financial independence so we could travel with them and still be open to working, still having, it's still teaching, still it's not the dream of like, I don't have to ever work again. It's more the idea of we're not stuck to this certain schedule that somebody over us has decided for us. Our schedule is our own, and we can spend more time with our kids. We don't have to right now my son's in daycare, and every time I drop him off, I'm like, okay, a few more months and then I can take him out of daycare and I can spend time with him instead of dropping him off to paying people to watch him so I can go to my work to pay, like earn the money to pay them to watch him, right? I want my own time with him. And we want to be able to do it traveling with them as well, and kind of give them these experiences at a younger age. So we're able to hit where our rental income covers our expenses. And then we're going to take a few years to travel with them. My husband's actually from England, so we're going to spend some time there and then kind of travel around. And then after that, we'll kind of see.
You hear that, Real Estate Maxis? One property, $180,000. And 2 years later, she's planning traveling the world with her family. That's how easy it is. The hardest part is convincing yourself that you can do this and taking the action. But once you're sort of in the game, your money's on the line, hey, I promise you success is going to come. Thank you for tuning in. Follow me at Real Estate Maxi on Twitter. I'm Alan Corey. I'm your host. You can also join the Real Estate Maxi Facebook group. I will happily answer all your questions there, and go to realestatemexi.com. Join the course, get the property calculator, and thanks again to Get Money Smarter, Mary Nickless, for her excellent wisdom and story today. Very inspiring. I want you to design your life through real estate just like Mary did. That's why I do the Real Estate Maximalist podcast. See you next time.